right, man, let's talk about MR.McMahon documentary live on Netflix. And before I continue on, let's crack open an ice cold beverage here. It's the weekend of Saturday night. Feeling good, right? Feeling good. So MR.McMahon documentary on Netflix, right? It's available right now so far. Now, according to the Netflix thumbnail, it says limited edition or limited time. So I'm not sure how long it's going to be on Netflix, or they're planning on shutting that son of a bitch down. But look, there's 6 episodes. I think the last time I checked was 50 or 59 minutes a piece. It's a damn near an hour a piece, man. And it got dropped this past Wednesday, right? This past Wednesday. What today is the 28th? 7654. What, the 25th, right? 24 to 25th. So 3 a.m. on the Wednesday, right? So there's people probably got up at 3 a.m. to watch this son of a bitch. Binge watched it, right? Binge watched it. And I got to say, for me, I kind of spread it out, right? I love to spread it out, baby. Iron Savages for AEW. All right, so I watched the first 3 on Wednesday. I'm like, oh, man, I just can't stay off the internet. I cannot just, like, frame myself. Like, I got to see. You're a wrestling fan. I'm foaming at the mouth. Like, I have to see it. So Wednesday, I decided to watch it. 3 episodes right after that. By Thursday, I watched the other 2. By Friday, I watched the last one, the 6th installment. And I got to say, really good. 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. If I was Dave Meltzer, I gave it a 16-star rating, Tokyo Dome style documentary. Yeah, man, it was a great. So let's skip over the bullshit here really quick. Documentary. You got people complaining. It's just a big collage. It's a big compilation of all the Dark Side of the Ring. Okay, so let's just hold off here for a second. Yes, Dark Side of the Ring cover some of the most controversial stuff coming out of the WWE and Vince McMahon, right? But there's always a but. On Dark Side of the Ring, you get the manager's side. You get the wrestler's side. You get the territory side. You get the promoter's side. You get the management side. You hear their stories. On this MR.McMahon documentary, you get the Vince McMahon side. You get the Bruce Pritchard side. You get the Shawn Michaels side. You get the Triple H side. You get the WWE side. So, there we go, man. You get the WWE side about these famous stories you hear from Dark Side of the Ring, which we'll get to shortly. But it was, let's talk about the first episode, right? And it's called Junior. That's what the first episode is called. All right, G, why is it called Junior? Well, it's very simple. Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr. His father, Vincent J. McMahon Sr. Everybody knows him as Junior. All the old-timers out there that's been in the business for almost 40-plus years still calls him Junior. So, it was a great story, right? The great story, the upbringing of Vince McMahon. And Vince told the world that he grew up poor. He grew up with a stepfather. He never, really been around his real father. So his stepfather was abusive. And he was very abusive to Vince McMahon. Obviously, Vince went to the military for quite a bit. He got his military background. Seeing the photos of Vince was just incredible. How his physiques are. He looks fantastic at a young age. And that's where he met Linda McMahon, right? Married her. So from there on, he discovered his actual real father. He found out his real father was a promoter for the WWF, not the World Wrestling Federation, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, maybe Capital Wrestling. It don't matter how it is. It's been going since generations before Vincent J. McMahon. I can look at us probably back in the 40s or 50s. I could be wrong. But this is under the Vincent J. McMahon era, right? Running Madison Square Garden, running Allentown, Pennsylvania, the Northeast Territories. This was at the time where wrestling was slowly adapting to territories. And this is where, I guess, Vincent Kennedy McMahon went to go work for his father. So there was a time in where I enjoyed the video. I kudos to Netflix, right? Kudos to Bill Simmons and the whole team of the documentary. They managed to pull the raw footage straight from the WWE archives. Dark Side of the Ring, they reenact those scenes. Unless they get like a permission from New Japan or something. But the Netflix documentary, they pulled raw footage straight from the WWE vault. That's the good part about it. They get permission from the WWE to get these awesome videos. And they got an awesome vintage video of Vince becoming a ring announcer. Where, you know, the original ring announcer came up to Vince's father, Vincent J. McMahon. I'm like, hey man, I'm not getting paid, blah, blah, blah. And his father's, you know, looking for money in the pocket, and they knew that they weren't making any money. So the referee quit. And that's where Vincent J. McMahon Sr. looked at Junior, and he's like, well, I guess you're the ring announcer. So that's how Vincent K. McMahon became a ring announcer. He started in his pro wrestling. They had a footage. There's a footage of his first debut as a ring announcer. You know, like, walk up! You know, kind of like a Samantha Irvin or Justin Roberts or Tony Schimmel. He was a ring announcer. So that was really cool, man, to see those kind of footage. And eventually the story gets into where he obviously bought the company from his father. Vince had a different vision. His father was against it. But Vincent K. McMahon, or Jr., had a vision. His vision was to go national. And we get to hear his story. Going national. Going on primetime TV like Saturday Night Main Event on NBC, which was later down the road. But they went national. He's gone to other towns that's not, you know, just not his territory. I mean, he's gone to St. Louis. He's going here. He's going to other territories' buildings. And he's taking talent left and right. Right? He took Hulk Hogan from the AWA. He took over by Roddy Piper from Portland. He's getting all these superstars from other territories. Now, Dark Side of the Ring, they talked about it, right? I believe it was the final episode, Black Saturday. Now, the Mr. McMahon documentary never ever featured Black Saturday, which is, I'm always curious about that day. Black Saturday, where Vince took over Georgia Championship Wrestling on their network television on TBS. So, I obviously I want more from his side about that story, but they never talked about that, which I wish they did. But anyway, here, obviously he bought the company from his father. Obviously, the biggest blow in Vince's history, and not in a sexual way here, folks. Just keep your minds in the gutter. The biggest heartbreaking of Vince's life was his father passing away. And he finally admitted on camera that his father said he loved him, to him face to face. So that was really emotional to see Vince crying on television or in front of a camera. It was very emotional for him. Obviously, they talked about WrestleMania 1, right? Obviously, it was a big financial success, but before then, that was it, man. They needed WrestleMania to be successful, or WWE could be in deep shit. Like, they could be done, right? Financial issues here, folks. They put a lot of money for this WrestleMania 1 at Madison Square Garden. Was that 1984, 1985? And thankfully, it became the huge commercial success that they decided to do WrestleMania 2. Which was a clusterfuck for some of the people. Again, you have WrestleMania 2 in 3 different cities and 3 different time zones. So you had the New York, Uniondale, New York, WrestleMania. 2, and I believe it was a boxing match here in Chicago at the legendary Allstate Arena. That's what I keep telling you guys. It's legendary, man. WrestleMania 2. You had the Battle Royal. You had, who was it? Refrigerator Perry from the Chicago Bears. Yeah, Andre the Giant. Obviously, I believe he won the Battle Royal, and he had a bag of cash, and he was thrown in the crowd. And then that was in Chicago. And then the third location was at the LA Sports Arena in Los Angeles. I believe it was a steel cage match between Hulk Hogan and Big King Kong Bundy, if I'm not mistaken, in a cage match at WrestleMania 2. So 3 locations, 3 different cities, and 3 different time zones. And from my understanding, even Bruce Pritchard said it was a shit show. So yes, Bruce Pritchard was a big component to this documentary because he is the right-hand man for Vince McMahon, the closest one to him. His best friend as well. So that was the nice little episode number 1, introduction of Vince's career. Now we get into episode, and by the way, they started off episode number 1 with a disclaimer about the allegation between him and Janelle Grant, which is going on right now currently. That's how it kicked it off, but it kicks off the show on the creation of Vince and his vision, right? His vision of the WWF or the WWE today. So obviously they move on to episode number 2, number 3. They talked about the first scandal, right? It was Rita Chatterton, the first WWF female wrestler, right? She accused Vince of forcing her to have, oral sex to keep her job. And she finally came out and talked about it to the public, and obviously she sued Vince McMahon, and I guess years later, Vince settled it. Actually, just recently, this past 2-3 years ago, he finally paid her. But yeah, man, that was one of the first to come out. Eventually, throughout the episodes, like episode 3, 4, 5, they start showing the scandals, right? The steroid trials of Hulk Hogan, right? They said that the WWF doctor who they hired was allegedly prescribing steroids to other wrestlers. And someone saw Hulk Hogan using it, and they ratted his ass out. And they talked about that as well, and obviously steroids were happening everywhere. Baseball, football, basketball. It was the norm. Just like cocaine, right? It was the norm. Everybody was doing it. So steroids was a well-known until the U.S. government and, the FDA, whatever the fuck it is, they eventually looked into the steroids and like, yeah, this is not good for your body. We're banning it. And eventually a big lawsuit happened, right? So that happened. Obviously, they talked about Jesse and Ventura trying to unionize the locker room. And Jesse Ventura was very vocal, which, he is the pioneer of trying to get it unionized backstage for the boys. Eventually, Vince found out, and everyone wondering, how did, when Vince trying to shoot it down, I guess Hulk Hogan was the one who ratted his ass out. He went to tell Vince that, man, this guy's back here blabbering his mouth off, trying to unionize the locker room, right? The union. And then it just put a bad taste in Jesse Ventura for him, and then Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. And obviously, long history, if you know Jesse's history, he decided to leave the WWF at the time and became an actor and became a successful individual, became a governor. Jesse Ventura is a fan. I never met the guy, but just hearing interviews, sound like a fantastic guy. Sound like they're burying the hatchet with the WWE, and hopefully they can work something out here. But in the meantime, they talked about that as well. They also talked about, what else they talked about? David Schultz, which featured on Dark Side of the Ring, where he slapped, was it Mark Stassel, the reporter from NBC or ABC, walking around asking the wrestlers back in the 80s, hey, is wrestling fake? Is wrestling fake? And eventually, David Schultz came back. They're like, you think it's fake? And you slapped the shit out of him, right? And then he got sued. Now, they didn't talk about him getting released in the WWE in this documentary, but on Dark Side of the Ring, they talked about it in details. What was his name? Dr. D. Schultz? Whatever, this Schultz, right? He talked about it. He was fizzling on Dark Side of the Ring. He talked about that moment. And, he talked about getting fired from the WWF weeks later. But they talked about that legendary story. What else they talked about? They also talked about, what else was on Dark Side of the Ring they talked about on the documentary? So they talked about Schultz. They talked about the steroid trials that the Dark Side of the Ring did. We get to hear the Vince side. Obviously, Hulk Hogan pretty much, I don't know, man. Obviously, he tried to stick with Vince here and avoid Vince doing some jail time for 17 years. That was the time the WWF product was getting shitty. It was getting not hot. Hulk Hogan decided to go to the WCW right in the middle of the steroid trial. We got Scott Hall and Kevin. Eventually, WCW was growing. It was growing. Eventually, WCW was kicking WWF's ass at the time. Nitro came in the fold and was kicking Raw's ass. They needed a new generation. They talked about Bret Hart. Obviously, they talked about the screw job, right? It's 101 wrestling history. This screw job. Shawn Michaels talked about it was the greatest punch of his life. And look, everyone, if you're a hardcore wrestling fan, you know about the screw job. I actually still have that VHS tape of the Bret Hart screw job. I still have that tape as a kid. We used to watch it all the time. Backstage footage of Bret Hart. They had a camera covered, and he went back there and socked Vince McMahon. But it is remarkable, man, that years later, it's still a well-known shitty time in the WWF at the time. I won't go through the whole story of the screw job, but I obviously Triple H and Shawn Michaels finally admitted on camera, and they're like, yeah, man, we told his family we didn't know anything about the screw job, but yeah, we knew about it, and Vince told us to shut up and not say nothing, and we just pretty much lied to the Hart family. So they finally admitted on camera, Triple H and Shawn Michaels, that they knew about the screw job. They just couldn't say anything because Vince told them to lie. Are you surprised? So they obviously talked about the screw job. Obviously, they talked about the Attitude Era, how the Attitude Era came evolved, and the comparison between Mr. McMahon and the real life Vince. And a lot of the wrestlers are saying, Tony Atlas and a bunch of other guys, like, okay, what's the difference between Mr. McMahon character and the true Vince that you see in the office? And they're like, you can't tell a difference. they're both similar. But they talk about the Attitude Era, of course, getting hot. Talking about the history of Stone Cold. I mean, they had the guns for this documentary. They had John Cena. They had Mark the Undertaker Calloway. They had Stone Cold Steve Austin. They had The Rock. They had the big guns for this documentary. Dark Side of the Ring, they weren't not able to get the big guns. So they were able to get the big guns for this documentary, and they talk about Stone Cold's history, Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold. Obviously, they talked about the Owen Hart. The Owen Hart, Fatally Night. Man, just remembering that video, or just seeing those. I'm lost for words right now about the Owen Hart situation. It was a shitty time. It was a shitty time. I believe it was out in Kansas City where this incident, Kemper Arena out in Kansas City. And, man, I remember hearing the stories about Owen Hart, getting killed, coming down the rafters. And obviously, it was a malfunction with the harness. He hit the turnbuckle. And eventually, when the EMTs came in the ring, they pronounced him that he was dead. It was hard to watch. Jim Ross, Jerry the King Lawler, trying to explain to the viewers at home what happened. The whole crowd was, just in shock. And, man, it was very hard to watch that. And they asked Vince in his interview, why did you continue on with the show? Why didn't you just cancel? Just stop the show and tell the fans, like, look, man, Owen Hart just fell. He died. The show's canceled. And Vince was like, look, man, I'm a businessman. I keep the show rolling. And they're having matches in the ring, and there's Owen Hart blood, who just died in that ring, still on the mat. And there's still matches going on. The pay-per-view is still going on. And, a lot of people were pissed off about that. It was a shitty situation for Vince. But even Vince was like, even my own son, even if I splat on that mat, the show will still continue on, And Vince thinks business. And, for a lot of people like myself, I think it's a shitty situation. They should have just canceled the show. But they talked about the fatal night of Owen Hart. So they talked about that. Then obviously they talked about, Vince owning WCW. They bought WCW. Obviously they talked about the scandal between him and, I don't know, having a inappropriate, inappropriate relationship with, or not relationship, but I guess, I don't know what was the proper term, with Sable. And Sable sued the WWF. And then during the lawsuit, Vince hires her back, which is insane. And they use it as a storyline. They talked about that. They talked about, what else they talked about? The WWE product going to PG. And how it became the drizzling shits. Once it transitioned to PG-13, all the hardcore or Attitude Era fans left. So it was all gooey and caca. I was one of those people that went away during the PG era, the PG-13 era that started it. I went away for a year or two, and I decided to come back to pro wrestling after I discovered Ring of Honor in New Japan. But WWE pretty much ran my happy ass off, along with a bunch of other people that were, loyal viewers, right? Became the drizzling shits. You can't just skip over the Attitude Adjustment era or the Ruthless Aggression. Attitude Adjustment is John Cena's finishing move. Ruthless Aggression. They talked about that era. John Cena. I was there. There was a lot of clips they showed on it that I was there in person. I could tell you right now, I gotta look for my photos. I'll put it on my official website, into the squarecirclepodcast.com. But there is I was there, man. Allstate Arena. John Cena made his debut, and I believe Undertaker was there. Backstage, even though the documentary said Taker couldn't make it, but I swear he was there. And he met Cena backstage. But, yeah, man, I was there to see Cena's debut, and it just makes sense for me to see him as one final time in Chicago. But, yeah, it was pretty cool, man, after seeing that. They talked about that era of the WWE, and they transitioned to the PG-13. How it became the shits. They talked about his relationship with Shane and Stephanie, and how Shane wants to be more involved, and he has a different direction and creative, and him and Vince were butting heads. Eventually, Shane McMahon got pissed off and left the WWE and started his own thing. And then decided to come back. And they brought him back, and again, WWE payback. Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, Stephanie, all in one ring. I was there, Allstate Arena. I actually have those photos on my official website right now, in my gallery section. I have a picture of Vince standing in the ring. So, yeah, man, I remember that time. Shane coming in, they said, they're going to change the product, but, as long as Vince is around, shit's not going to change. But eventually, they talked about the allegation between him and Janelle Grant. And obviously, Vince decided to cancel his interview once that allegation came out. And Vince decided to say, you know what, I canceled the documentary. And that was it. That was it. And they talked about him, leaving the company, coming back, and then leaving again. And Triple H is taking over. So they talked about that as well. So it was a great documentary. Great pieces here in the WWE side of these famous stories, of course. Great B-roll footage of the WWE product. Seeing some behind-the-scenes stuff, which is pretty cool. A lot of the vintage stuff. So, they mentioned AEW. They mentioned AEW as a competition on the documentary, which is hilarious. So they talked about that, and they talked about getting Cody from AEW, who was VP of the company. So that was really cool, man. They mentioned AEW. But, yeah, man, it was a hell of a documentary. Really good. I enjoyed it, and enjoy it while you have it, man, before Vince buys it out or, they get sued or something by Netflix. But, man, that was good stuff, man. Great 6 episodes. Go check it out right now on Netflix.